Mr. Masding, just to clear up a little matter with you first. I want to clear up this little matter with you first.
Yes, sir.
On the 26th of the 10th, I was on Morning Ireland, and I was quoting figures from the day before from the Minister's press release, 25th of October. And your hired hand called in to say that I was giving wrong information. Your interviewer and John McGuinness have both made incorrect suggestions on this point in recent times. Now, I don't mind having a direct exchange with you here, and I don't mind that exchange being robust, but I want to tell you that I do take exception to a bank that is under this type of scrutiny, sending out a sniper to take me out just because I was quoting from the Minister's lines. It might have been far better off if you had to use the cost, I suppose, the money that you pay these firms to keep an eye on things, to apply it to the 200 staff that you have working. I certainly didn't like the attitude of the bank in that regard, and I certainly didn't like the attitude of the individual who contacted RTE and who I spoke to later on that morning. So just to make that clear, don't mind any exchange here, but I do take exception with people trying to muddy the waters and are not prepared to go on the same radio to discuss the matter or to defend their numbers or position. It's a cowardly type of act. I want to turn to your customers who were here before us and to say that as of today, nothing seems to have happened in their case from the day that they appeared before this committee and gave their position. So I know you won't discuss individual cases, but these are cases that were made public by consent of your individual customer. So I'm going to do as you suggested with Senator Donnell. I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond directly to the committee in relation to the customers that you, I'm sure, have heard giving their outline of their situation and circumstances to this committee here. And I'll give you that information after the meeting to make sure that there's no cross wires. As you were speaking, Mr. Masding and Mr. Mitchell, the number of text messages that were coming through, and the content of those text messages tell their own story. The banks have a way of, using words at this committee, and they certainly have a way of painting a big picture that might give the impression that everything is okay and that you're on top of your game. But I use my time on this committee to try and bring you back to your customer, because what you have said earlier on in your opening statement and in answers to the other members of this committee has caused outrage with a big number of people. For example, one text message reads, "I'm livid listening to this rubbish. Resistance is the position of the bank." The other comment that has caused issue is you standing by the approach of your team. You're sticking up for permanent TSB, and the customers of your bank are writing into us, asking us to stand up for them because they believe that they are not being listened to. Mr. Mitchell, you were outlining what happens in terms of the hearings, oral hearings and so on. There was someone at an oral hearing today and they said that none of what you outlined was offered to them, and they simply want you to know that that is the case. Another case today in relation to repossession. No money has been paid to the client. Again, that came in during the course of this meeting. To go back to some of the other customers that are written in, this gentleman, I don't know how you actually sanction these loans or how they were sanctioned. But back in 2004, when a mortgage was sanctioned, did you ask for, or would you have asked for, mortgage protection in relation to those mortgages? Was that a question that you would have asked? Is it something that you would have insisted on?
Mortgage protection insurance was an option. I can't remember exactly the dates that it was an option for, but it was an option for a number of years.
But it was only an option. You needn't have taken it out. You didn't insist on it.
We didn't insist on it, no.
Okay. Because in spite of this lady's health and the fact that mortgage protection was refused, you still gave a mortgage in 2004, knowing that the health of the person was not what it could have been or should have been. But anyway, the lady died in...
Just on that, is it not the case that to get a mortgage you must have mortgage protection insurance or life cover up to the value of the mortgage?
Yeah.
Is that not the case?
It is for the family home, but for buy-to-let properties and investment mortgages it is not the case. And there are two types of mortgage protection. There's one that protects the customer's repayments, and there's one that protects the life. So I'm happy to take the details of that.
No, you answered. No, you answered a question earlier on, which a number of people who contacted us said was incorrect. Now, you later changed some of that reply, and just now I asked you about this, and you said no. And Deputy McGrath's intervention and your reply clearly confirms that it would have been needed.
Just to be clear, I want to be absolutely honest with you on this. The mortgage repayment protection is an option. Mortgage protection insurance, which is life cover on the property, is not an option. I beg your pardon, is required for a family home, but for an investment property.
But this is a family home.
So again, I'm not familiar with.
So you gave this mortgage to this person, and she had been diagnosed with cancer in 1998. She died in 2015, and you continued to write to her husband, in spite of the fact that he kept telling you that she had died. No, sorry, Mr. Mazur. Let me finish now. The reason I'm making this point to you is that you have not dealt fully with this individual. And the fact that you would continue to write to his wife who had died 3 years earlier now, it's 2018, shows that either your records were in not what they should be, or you ignored the individual concerned who was suffering the loss of his wife. And then when you did write, you pointed out that this lady who had died owed the €358. I just find that outrageous when you take into consideration what you're saying to others in this tracker debacle. So my question is there no humanity or compassion in that bank? What flexibility do you have in dealing with these cases? The tracker cases and others. What flexibility do you have, Mr. Masing, to intervene and to bring about a reasonable solution to a family that's under pressure? And what sort of oversight do you apply to cases like that? Your oversight now I'm talking about.
I give my staff a series of mandates in terms of the decisions they can make, and therefore they have their own decision rights. That's my job as the Chief Executive. In terms of the bank's track record at this committee, I would like to think that at the end of every committee we have gone round and talked to each of the deputies. We've taken the cases. We've made a commitment to revert, and we've always done that. So if you would like to give me that case, again, I'll give you my commitment that we will look at it. There's probably three things that I would, assuming you've finished, Chairman.
No, you can work away. Answer the question.
Yeah, there's probably three things that I would say, just in answer to your original set of comments, and I'd want to make sure that they were separated. The first one was that in the opening remarks, we were very clear that we made errors and there were failures in the bank, and that we were very, very sorry for that. And I have made that statement at every public event since 2015, including before going to the Minister. So I would obviously repeat that to you. The second point I would make was separate, and I hope that there's no confusion here. The point I was making was that since 2015, we've had 200 people out of a total staff population of barely over 2,000 focusing on this work. And the point I was making was that we looked at every single mortgage contract over a 2.5-year period. And each of those customers and those contracts went through a set of gates to determine whether they were an impacted customer. And the point I was making was that in permanent TSB, that programme was done in a systematic fashion. That was the second point. The third point I would make would be, and I think again I need to keep reiterating that, we don't make payments to customers until they give us permission to do so, because we're not allowed to do so. So we would encourage, as we do at all public events, anybody who has an offer, please send it back to us. We will make the payment. And as Stephen has said, that does not then disallow the customer from going through the process of appeal, which includes our own appeals process, it includes the FSO, and it includes the courts. So again, I would commend to this committee that if any of your constituents remain suspicious, as I'm sure some of them will do, please send the offer back. We will make the payments, and it does not deny any customer a right of the appeals process. So in summary, we did harm, we apologise, we tried to do the programme to the standards set by the central bank. I think my comments about permanent TSB were around the way that we did the programme. And in terms of offers, I would encourage all customers please to get back the offers so we can make the payments.
And I asked you about looking at these cases compassionately, and I asked you what flexibility you have within the bank.
I'll give you some examples of flexibility. So we've been clear on the loss of ownership cases, for example, that will write down any mortgage shortfall. You'll know that we recently had an assisted voluntary sale programme in our buy-to-let book where we had, I think, positive feedback from customers that we gave them a way out, including writing off the shortfall. So we have a track record, I think, of being innovative to try and help customers with their situation. So I commend to you that the bank has the right mindset in terms of its customers.
Okay. When you settle with a customer in terms of the tracker, you pay compensation and you pay redress. Do you ever withhold any of that money and set it off against maybe part of a loan that's in
Arrears?
Yeah.
I think we do, don't we?
So the way the process works is it's
to bring the customer back into the position that they would have been had we not overcharged. So if a customer is in a level of arrears, the correction is applied to reduce that level of arrears, and any surplus of the correction then becomes a payment to the customer.
So, you were a customer that was overcharged, say, by €60,000. They received 10% compensation and 10% of the overcharge amount. Right, that's your deal.
Yeah.
I would have imagined that money should have gone directly to the customer.
So
in the case that I'm speaking about, it didn't. Part of it went to offset the warehouse part of the mortgage, or part of the mortgage that was warehoused. I want to know, is that the policy that you use right across your accounts? And do you think that that's fair?
So I suppose in any case which has been part of an arrears process, typically they are more complex, and I wouldn't like to comment in detail unless we saw the specifics of the case.
I'm asking you generally.
But I think generally, had we not overcharged the customer, the level of the warehouse would likely have been smaller. So to the extent that we have warehoused part of the mortgage where we charge 0% and don't look for a repayment until maturity for that portion of the mortgage, to the extent that we've overcharged the customer, typically the warehouse would have been smaller than we had to make it, and so that is part of applying the correction that we have to make.
And do you consult with the customer in relation to that?
In relation to, it would depend on the specifics of the case, and at that point I think I'd have to see the specifics before I comment.
Yeah, well, I just want to make the point that I would have thought, given all of what you've done to families and to individuals, that you would have at least pay them back directly or in consultation with them to deal with the monies that was due to them, rather than taking the decision within the bank to allocate, in this case, a certain amount against a part of the mortgage that was warehoused.
The decision I made was that the redress would go against the balance, the compensation goes straight to the customer. Because it's two payments, of course.
So you think it's fair? Given all of what the trauma and stress and everything else that you've heaped on these people, that is what you do with them, without consultation.
If the customer's in arrears, then we put them back to the position that they would have been in, and therefore the redress must be applied against the total balance. The compensation goes directly to the customer.
But they may very well appeal the figures that you've given them. So therefore, should you not wait for the appeals process or the process entered into by the customer to finish before you just take money and put it back into an account?
Well, the idea,
because they have been deprived of the appropriate rate, the appropriate product, their lives have been affected, and rather than you then deciding for the bank and keeping that money or part of it before the process completes, and you have no difficulty cold-heartedly taking that money and putting it off another amount.
I've made the bank's position clear.
I know you have, Mr. Ramsey, yeah. That's the difficulty. You just keep on answering, that you have the mantra, you keep on throwing it out there, question after question. I've asked you about humanity and compassion. I've asked you about everything, and you seem to be comfortable, is your word, with everything that you're doing. And I have to tell you that your customers are not comfortable with a lot of the stuff that you're doing. And you seem to ignore that in spite of your opening statement. That's the point I'm trying to make continuously in relation to the treatment of your customers. This particular customer says, my personal view of this process is that it's just a joke and window dressing. We got the same standard response that the bank thinks the overpayment did not have an impact on us. €60,000 represents for them their income in the year. So I don't think you actually understand some of your customers. And if it wasn't for this committee's hearings, you would never even listen to them in this, at this depth.
So again, to remind the committee that the payments are only applied once the customer signs. We distinguish very clearly between redress and compensation. The point of redress has been made, compensation goes directly to the customer. That's why.
Well, this customer says we're not happy with the way we were treated and want our overpayment refunded to us, and feel that 10% compensation was far short of the mark, considering the years of hell that we have been through. You don't seem to get that. That's the difficulty that I see in relation to your case.
And in that particular case, I suppose I'd say to the customer that we have an appeals process.
What you're doing is you're sending these people into these processes, and it's fine that they're there. But why don't you just come up front with them and try and remove from their lives the hardship that they have experienced to date, and live up to your words? You've very fine words in your opening statement, but your actions, according to what I'm reading here from your customers, is quite different. Quite different. And you have to understand that this particular customer I just read from, there were 60,000 euros overcharged. That is a massive amount of money for anyone that is trying to, rear a family, keep things together, battle off the various costs of living that they're dealing with, and at the same time then being harassed by your bank. I don't think you understand that at all. And just another piece of correspondence here from a man who is trying to tried before and was refused by your bank, in spite of the fact that the letters that I have seen here dating back to 2006, you may switch to a tracker or fixed rate mortgage at any time. That's what this letter says. And he still was ruled as not being impacted. And there's other pieces of correspondence here, same gentleman, and it's the same story. How can you use words like that in a letter in 2006, as clear as that, and then deny him the right to be considered as an impacted customer? I just don't get it. And again, I'm going to give you that case afterwards. But these are not just one or two cases. I've just taken examples of correspondence. I did it with every single bank that came in here before us. And you're no different than the rest of them. You've robbed them, you've covered it up, and you're attempting to do it again. I'm not talking about you personally. But the banking situation in this country and what's going on now in terms of this committee and what's being highlighted, Jesus, it leaves an awful lot to be desired. And I'll go back to the same thing again. It is not acceptable that if you don't understand it, that you don't get somebody else to try and understand it. The difficulties in people's lives I'm talking about. Would you like to make any comment on any of that?
I'm trying to rebuild permanent TSB. We absolutely understand the situation of the banking industry in terms of its reputation and trust in Ireland. And as I said in my opening remarks, myself and my team, we will do all we can to try and rebuild that reputation and trust on an ongoing basis.
Mr. Masling, you baffle me. You baffle me. You cannot be without some sort of humanity and compassion. And every word in the beginning of your statement, during the questioning, I'm rebuilding PTSB. Well, you know what you should do? You should attempt to rebuild the lives that have been destroyed by PTSB first. And that, as an act in itself, would be rebuilding PTSB. I don't see you doing that. And these customers that have written to me and other members of the committee, they're telling the truth. They pour out their lives to us here. And I can't believe the likes of Pádraig Cassan writing to us again today, telling us that your customers that appear before this committee have still not been looked after, have still not been dealt with, and that they received the reply, standard reply, the rate they are on is what they are contractually entitled to. I mean, do you stand over all of that?
On the basis that we have looked at each case, as outlined by my team, we have applied their criteria as given to us. I stand over, subject to the central bank's oversight, 1,979.
No, I'm asking you, Mr. Masding, what standard do you have? What standard does your bank have? Forget the central bank and everybody else. This is about you and your customers. And you must have a standard. Your bank must have a standard. And how would you apply that to these customers, that standard? Do you think, in view of what I've read out, and take it as being true, take what Pádraig Cassan has said as being true, that you're falling short of some standard that you must have in that bank?
I will take the cases and I will look at them. Myself and my colleagues, I believe we have the highest standards.
You know that? You haven't changed one bit. You haven't changed one single bit. I'd say if you got the chance tomorrow, you'd do exactly the same thing. And I don't believe for 1 minute it was a systems failure. One bank came in and told us that it was possibly because they were losing money on the trackers that they would stop. And in answer to Deputy Doherty, you continue to say it was a systems failure. You're the best company man that I've seen in here for a long time, but you certainly ain't a friend of your customers. And I know I may be pushing the boat out here, but I'm appealing to you and your colleagues to have some sort of understanding of your customer and what they're going through, what they've gone through, and to apply some sort of flexibility and understanding and compassion to their cases. Your statement says it all, but your actions are quite different. And if you were to act in accordance with the words that you use in your statement, we would probably not be getting these text messages and emails. And can I finally ask you, have you engaged with Pádraig Cassan? Not on the basis of him representing customers, but have you chatted to him on the overall issues around the tracker mortgages, to learn anything from him, seeing he's the one that's named constantly as being the individual that knows most about them?
I've met Mr. Cassan, yes.
That's it. What do you think? Just what do you think?
Sorry.
What did you think of the knowledge he has around the tracker issue?
If the knowledge gives us a different set of facts from those which we have, we then, through the appeals process, make different payments and, to use your words, I think show understanding and compassion of a new set of facts.
So did he give you a different understanding?
I met him at a. We were talking about the overall scheme and some individual customers, which obviously I can't talk about now. And I won't want to break confidences by discuss. I have met him in answer to your question.
You should be ashamed of yourselves. What are you? Should be absolutely ashamed of yourselves. The manner in which you're conducting yourself now, how you're conducting yourself with different customers. I certainly, if I was interviewing you for a bank licence, I wouldn't give it to you. Deputy Dar.